Hello everybody! Today I'm going to show you how to disable Print Spooler on domain controllers. Print Spooler is a service that takes care of print management. So that includes, but is not necessarily limited to, managing printer drivers, scheduling print jobs, and so on. But many of you probably remember the critical vulnerability in the past referred as PrintNightmare that was happening in 2021, and this vulnerability allowed attackers to execute code without administrator privileges. And this is one of the reasons why you should completely disable Print Spooler on domain controllers. Because it should not be necessary to run Print Spooler on domain controllers. Domain controllers should be domain controls only. Domain controllers should not do anything else besides the services related to Active Directory. So there should be no other roles, nothing else installed on domain controllers except for the things that are related to Active Directory. So only the roles of Active Directory domain services and DNS should be installed on domain controllers. Print services should not be installed. Unfortunately, I see quite often that companies use domain controllers for other things as well. So domain controllers serves as file servers. Sometimes domain controllers also serves as print servers. So there are printers connected and shared on domain controllers, and devices connected to Active Directory send print services or print jobs to printers via domain controllers. But that's not recommended. But you should keep that in mind, because when you disable Print Spooler on domain controllers, it effectively blocks print jobs on domain controllers. So if you are running print services on domain controllers, you need to migrate the print services to some other server, because you cannot have it running on domain controllers and have Print Spooler disabled. Print Spooler effectively blocks it. But like I said, print services should definitely not be running on domain controllers. I understand that there are small organizations that has small infrastructure and they consolidate services, but domain controllers are the crown jewels for your environment, and that's the reason why domain controllers should be protected as much as possible. And that's the reason why there should be no other services running on domain controllers other than the services that are specifically related to Active Directory. But before you actually disable Print Spooler, just make sure that it's not needed, it's not running on your domain controllers. There are two ways how you can, or multiple ways in general, how you can disable Print Spooler on domain controllers. The simplest way is via services locally on your domain controllers. So if you go to services.msc and scroll down here to P Print Spooler, you see the service here. And you also see that the service is running. And this is a clean installation of Windows Server 2022 with just the Active Directory domain services role installed. It's a completely new, clean installation, no changes, only the Active Directory services role was installed on the server, but there were no changes even to the Active Directory domain services role at all. And you can see that the Print Spooler is running on the domain controller, because the service by default is running, it's always running. So you can disable it from here. You can open the service and change the startup type to disabled. That effectively blocks the service from running, so it will not start up automatically after server reboot. But you would need to do this manually for all of your domain controllers. And you would need to do this manually also for newly promoted domain controllers in the future. It's definitely not recommended to do anything manually in your environment. especially related to domain controllers, and especially when you have Active Directory in place. So I will leave this as it is now. I will keep it running here, and I will focus on group policies and how to disable the Print Spooler service via group policies. So I have this group policy management console open. As you can see, it's a clean environment. No group policy objects, nothing created, nothing modified. The first way how you can disable Print Spooler on domain controllers is via the default domain controllers policy. But it's not recommended to modify the default domain controllers policy. So I will rather create a new group policy object here. So I right-click the group policy objects and choose new. I put a name here. It will be simple: disable Print Spooler. I right-click the newly created group policy object and select Edit. I will enlarge it so it's better visible. And there are two settings that you should configure when disabling Print Spooler. First setting is disabling the service itself. Second setting is disabling or disallowing Print Spooler to accept client connections. Technically, the second one is not needed. If you disable the service, the second setting that disables Print Spooler to accept client connections is not needed, is redundant. But I like it the way that it's configured on both sides. So first, we go to Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, System Services, and here we scroll down to P, where the Print Spooler service is located at. We open the setting, we check this checkbox that we want to define this policy setting, and make sure that disabled is selected. This effectively disables the Print Spooler service. So we click Apply and OK. You see that it changed from not defined to disabled. So now we have disabled the Print Spooler service. The second part of this configuration, but like I said, this is enough. This is enough to block Print Spooler on domain controllers or in general any devices. But that was the other part of the setting that I recommend to set. And the other part of the setting is located also in Computer Configuration Policies, but then in Administrative Templates. So I go to Administrative Templates, Printers, and here is a setting that to allow Print Spooler to accept client connections. So I open this setting and change it to disabled. This effectively disables the Print Spooler service to accept client connections. So I click Apply and OK. Now I'm done with the configurations, so I can close the editor window. I'll just briefly refresh it. Open the disabled Print Spooler just to double check that it's really configured. And I can see both settings here. So Print Spooler startup mode is disabled, and allow Print Spooler to accept client connections is also set to disabled. Now the last part of this configuration is to link this group policy object to the domain controllers OU. So I select the domain controllers OU, right click it, choose link an existing GPO, select the disable Print Spooler and click OK. This domain controllers OU is by default pre-created when you deploy or install the Active Directory domain services role. Domain controllers OU is the OU where all domain controllers are by default located at. Even if you create a new domain controller, if you promote a server to be a domain controller, the object is automatically moved to the domain controllers OU. So we want to disable it for all domain controllers, which is the reason why I linked it to the domain controllers OU. Now you see it's linked here. The link order is 2, which is fine, because the default domain controllers policy doesn't configure the Print Spooler service at all. Of course, you can move it to the top if you want to. You can also enforce it if you want to, but it's not necessary. Neither of it is necessary. So just linking it to the domain controllers OU should be fine, unless you have another GPO that actually allows Print Spooler. Alright, that was all from my side for today. I hope you liked the video. Please share the video on your social networks as well, because I feel like it's really important to spread the word, because the PrintNightmare vulnerability was pretty serious. There was a lot of organizations affected by the Print Spooler vulnerability. So please share it on your social networks so that other companies also disable Print Spooler on domain controllers. Also, don't forget that I have a weekly newsletter in the form of a podcast. You can find the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to follow my Cybersecurity World blog and my personal profiles on social media such as Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find me there by my name, Lucas Baran. So follow me for more tips and tricks from the world of IT and cybersecurity. That's really all from my side for today. Thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.